And there was a lot of interest, especially from non-Iranians who wanted to know, what are you doing, first of all? Are you going to eat this? Is it for the cats? I don't know.
So Naz Deravian, salam. Thank you so much for joining me again.
Salam, Leila June. I'm so happy to be with you.
Me too. It's been a long time. And so we have a previous interview that we did with Naz, what, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, a long time ago. And back when did your book come out, your Bottom of the Pot?
Oh my gosh. And it came out in 2018.
Okay, 2018. So soon after that, we did an interview.
Yes.
It was, you know what? It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. That's why it feels like 8 years ago. The pandemic had just happened or maybe it was right before the pandemic.
Yes, I think we were unsure of what was going to happen. And so a long
Yes. Yes. But I will say your book, Bottom of the Pot, has remained my favorite cookbook. I look at it all the time still, even though in the beginning, Naz writes very clearly, she says, you can make food out of this book a few times, but then abandon the book and do it yourself. I still have not flown the coop yet, I have to admit.
I encourage you. I'm sending you off, Leila June.
Okay, I did do adas polo. Yesterday I made adas polo without the book. I did think about it. I was like, I'm talking to Naz tomorrow. I just have to do this. And it was good.
You can do it.
Thank you. But we have Naz here today. So you can go back to that interview. I'm going to link it to this episode. I highly encourage it. We talked about how to, our main topic was how to raise kids being Nimruni. Your kids were a lot younger then. Now one is going to college. So a lot of things have changed. But today we want to talk specifically about Naz's, we're going to release this episode on March 5th. So when you listen to this on March 7th, Naz is going to begin her yearly tradition of growing sabzé. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So if you can tell us a little bit about this tradition, what it is and why you started doing this group sabzé growing.
So first of all, the sabzé growing is not my tradition whatsoever. It's in our communal Iranian tradition of sprouting, be it wheat or lentils, or it could be anything really, barley, but sprouting what we call wheatgrass. And this is part of our ritual for Nowruz, which is our new year, which corresponds with the beginning of spring. Nowruz is also celebrated in other parts of the world, namely Afghanistan, Tajikistan, etc., etc. But as Iranians, this is what we do. And what sabzé is, so we sprout the lentil sprouts. I use lentils, and a lot of people get on me about why aren't you doing wheat, gandum, which is what we're typically used to seeing in the Iranian markets and whatnot. So I will say it here, friends, I don't have, just like everybody else, I don't have a lot of time. Maybe sometimes I'm traveling. Gandum takes a lot more attention. Otherwise, it'll get moldy and gross and all of that. I don't have that in me. I'm an impatient person, so I'm going to take the easier route. And for me, it's lentils. Anyways, so what we do is over about 14 days, we sprout these lentils, and then we place them on what's called the sofre hafsin, which is the symbolic decorative tablescape, essentially, which has different symbolic items on it. Some can be edible, some are not. And the sabzé is one of them. And what sabzé symbolizes is really spring, these greens, and it's renewal, new life, and new beginnings. So that's sabzé. The thing about me becoming the sabzé lady,
yeah,
that happened very organically and naturally, I guess. I never intended to do this.
Yeah.
And I think it was even before my book came out on Instagram, back in the good days of Instagram, where you could just be and, do things as you wanted and not feel so pressured. Or anyways, back in the heyday of Instagram,
Mhm.
um, once in a while I would post updates about my sabzé, and there was a lot of interest, especially from non-Iranians who wanted to know, what are you doing? First of all, are you going to eat this? Is it for your? Is it for the cats? I don't know. Wheatgrass for cats. And so, as every year, I would post more often. Like sometimes it was every 3 days. I would say, okay, in the next 3 days, do this. And there was more and more interest. And it was a beautiful thing, Layla June. All of a sudden, there was this community from around the world, and people were reaching out to me from like Japan and Amsterdam and South Africa and Tajikistan and even from in Iran. And they're saying, we're doing this with you. And I was so touched and taken aback. It was like beautiful, right? And it was the year of the pandemic, so 2020. And as we were all across the globe going into lockdown, that I had one post and I said, I don't really know if I should continue doing this. It doesn't feel right. Everyone is suffering, and I just didn't feel like I needed to be posting this hopeful, because that's what it also symbolizes. It's hope. And so many people commented and said, this is exactly what we need. And this is how we keep connected. And something in me just went, of course, this is what I need too. In that really, really hard time, during that really, really hard time.
Right.
So I started posting daily, and then ever since, now for those 14 days, is you will find me on Instagram. You won't find me often any other time,
Right. Yeah, true.
but I will come back and make an appearance.
But the interesting thing is, since 2020, the world has just become better and better every year, and we have less and less problems. And so, of course, everyone just wants to do sabze. So now it's just, we all live very simple lives, no problem.
No, so to your point, it feels like every year after 2020, I've had the same thought. First, do I really want to do this on a daily? Because I'm not a huge fan of social media. You and I have had this conversation. It's like I come and go, right?
Right.
But I am reminded that these traditions, these ancient, ancient, ancient traditions, have existed because of dark times and the better days too, but mostly because of those dark days when we need to cling to each other and find community and share and look towards, what I say is, reach for the light. Because if you grow your sabzeh with me, we're going to search for the light, right? Because the sprouts need light, and you will literally see them lean towards the light as they're growing. And I feel like more and more, that's what we all need to do. Rather than getting stuck in the hibernation of a cold, dark winter, we all need to start coming out and leaning into the light and leaning into each other.
I love that. I saw your post from this year, and it was a long post, and it said, every year I do this, and I was bracing for you to say, I'm done with it. I'm like, so I read it, and then I was like, oh, thank God. Okay. We're gonna do it again. Yes, okay, it's not that bad. And actually, to your point, last week I interviewed a progressive congresswoman from Florida, Anna Escamani, and our interview just came out last week. But one of the questions I asked her, because for her, she's living in Florida, she's progressive, and so she has kind of this, the government of Florida is pretty hostile towards her, and now she has a hostile national entity above her as well. And I was like, what do you recommend for people? Like, how do you? And the first thing she said was, I recommend you go out and touch grass. And what you were just saying right now totally reminded me, like, what, let's up it. Like, not only touch grass, but create grass. Like, that's such a beautiful thought. It is something that humans have always needed. There's always been darkness. There's always been war and craziness all around us. And it is one of the first things you do is touch grass.
Literally touch grass. And I
Yeah.
I would also add to that, I encourage you don't have to do this with me. You don't have to do this at all. You can just watch it happen and see the progression of it. But I encourage everyone, everyone, regardless of your political stance, anything, join us. And let's do this together. It's just I am a like my mother. I'm a realist, so I don't believe in this symbolic act is just gonna kumbaya and we're all no. But I think there are moments where we can connect, and we've lost that. We've utterly
Right.
lost that.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I love that idea. This is again for everyone to do together. Um, and I will say about your mother as well, we have a poem that is very applicable to right now too. Unfortunately, is applicable to every year. Your mom was a songwriter or a writer for songs mainly. Taron and Nevis, is that right? Is that what you?
Caro Nasara.
Taron Sara, even nicer. And so she wrote a tarone called Migan Ke Jange Jange. And we have, I'll link to that on this show as well. It's about spring coming, but being in this time of war, in this time of upheaval. So again, another thing, it wasn't written in the past 4 years. It was written decades ago at this point. And I feel like we're here we are again. But to your point, it makes it even more important for us to carry these traditions, no matter where we are. This tradition maybe began in one region, but we can all celebrate it no matter where we are in the world.
Yeah, and I think what it does is all those questions that I get from around the world, it starts a conversation. And I've always felt like we just need to have a conversation. And unfortunately, social media has made it so pretty much across the board now that conversation is dead and it's just about attacking each other. So hopefully we can't attack each other about sabzé, right? Like, what's there to guys? If you find like you're attacking me about sabzé, we've lost, totally lost the thread.
Do you get criticism? Because we talked about that before recording about this criticizing nature of our culture. Is that something that do people say like, why don't you do wheatgrass? Why don't you do this?
I do get asked a lot about why aren't we doing wheatgrass, and I try to address that in every post. In every post, I'll say, "This is lentil sabzit. This is my way of doing it. It has worked. I'm not changing it because it's worked, and I'm a little superstitious that way." So, and it's just a suggestion. It's always a suggestion. Now, I also live in Los Angeles, so my climate is very, very different, and my sabza is gonna grow now. Knock on wood, I'm saying that, and just watch this. But and usually, typically for myself, I would start the process a little later because by the 14th day, my sabza is like reach. But I don't care. It doesn't matter. We're doing this together, and that's really, we were talking about this word shirin, right? We were saying that although yes, there are these other aspects to our culture, but there's also our culture is so shirin, which means sweet, sweet in it. And this idea of growing this what has become this tradition of growing sabzi together is so shirin to me. It really is, and it puts a smile on my face every day.
Definitely. And so everyone follows Bottom of the Pot on Instagram. And that's where we'll start on March 7th. We all start together. I post about it daily as well as I'm following Naz with my kids too. It's a very fun thing to do with your kids. They love having that. And usually we do lentils and we also do mung beans, which is the same timing, right?
Yeah.
So we'll do it with both. And they both grow really nicely, different kinds of sprouts. But every day she'll give instruction on what to do. So for a person like me that, as I mentioned in the beginning, I love following instruction, maybe to a fault, it's just a foolproof way of doing it. And on top of that, people will tag Naz. And so she'll put, those tags in her stories and you can just see everyone's.
That's another part of it that just grew organically because people would DM me photos and they wanted sabze IT basically. They were like, "What's wrong with this?" I'm doctoring, like trying to figure out. But then they started sharing that their sabze was growing, and so one by one I started posting their sabze, and then it became this thing, and I just felt like our my Instagram stories were becoming flooded with these beautiful images of sabzé, and I can't think of really anything more shireen again.
Yes. So even if you're feeling down about social media, this will make you feel really good about this aspect of it. So, and you also mentioned before, like there's shirin, but a lot of shirin things turn talh, sour really quickly. And this is a good example of taking something that might have become talh over time and making it shirin again. So I love
Yes,
that.
yeah, yeah.
But also, can we also talk about a few of the other traditions that you do for Nowruz? You've written articles for the New York Times about the foods you make. So, what all do you make, and when do you start kind of preparing for Nowruz with your food?
So I would say right now is the best time for everyone to start khane takani or khune takuni, as more colloquially, which literally means shaking the house. But what I refer to khane takani is like the mother of all spring cleans.
Okay.
So about a month before Nowruz, most Iranians will start doing a spring clean, which means like really getting in there and going through what you need and what you don't need and scrubbing. But more than that, it's also a more internal hunetakuni too, and really looking within yourself and seeing what can you let go of now this year. Like what were you holding on to that was turning talc, bitter, bittering, souring inside of you, right? So start with that. So again, I am not, I do my best with hunatakuni, but if I don't get to every corner, it's okay, right? Like I take it easy on myself and it can continue. Not traditionally, you're supposed to have it all done, this Iranian perfectionism before Nowruz, but I'm like, okay, so if I didn't get to that room, we still have the rest of the year. So start with that. And then I start thinking, so for Nowruz, we have a very set menu. At least in my house, we do. And I think for most Iranians, they do as well. And again, it's based on the symbolism of spring, new beginnings, new life. So we have sabzi polo, which is a rice dish with all these fresh herbs. Sabz, the word sabz is green. So we have sabzi, which are the first fresh herbs. Then we have sabzé, which are the sprouts, two different words. So we have the sabzi polo. Typically, it's served with mahi, which is fish, and it can be a fried fish. You can make it in the oven. You can stuff it, and kuku sabzi, which is again sabzi. It's the green herb frittata. So that for in my house, that's typically what we prepare. There's also resh de polo, which is the rice with with noodles. And if you are a baker, just like other holidays, like winter holidays, this is about when you start baking. And there are many shirinian for Nowruz, Nowruz sweets that you can make, which we also put on the sofre hafsin, and they're symbolic as well. And it's to ensure sweetness in the year to come. It's really lovely. Um, so you can either start baking yourself, or there are many, many great Iranian bakers out there, and you can purchase your shirini. You don't have to bake it yourself, but that's part of the tradition. And then, as you have said before, Nowruz, there are many components to Nowruz, and it can feel overwhelming, right? So as you have encouraged people, and I encourage people, do not get overwhelmed by this. Pick one or two aspects of it. You don't have to do all of it. So pick one or two aspects of it, right? Grow sabze, buy your shirini, see if someone will have you over for Nowruz dinner. You don't have to make it yourself, right?
Exactly. Exactly. People get hung up on the details. And you've also mentioned before, like you live in Los Angeles, there's all these huge gatherings happening. But then sometimes, like for season, I know for Charsham Masudi one year, you were like, I'm not going to this big gathering. We just put a little candle and we jumped over it. We're fine. And I love that. I think embrace don't get overwhelmed. Remember in Iran, people have 2 weeks off. And also when they're working too, let's face it, they're like kind of working and also like having a lot of chai throughout the day. leading up to Nowruz, so they have a lot more time and a lot more flexibility to kind of get to these things. We're in our American system, we're always running, running, running. It's a lot harder to do these things. So just take it easy, be easy on yourself.
So something else I would recommend is I know everyone gets very excited about growing the sabzé, and I think because like for the winter holidays, let's say for Christmas, for instance, we're like, I'm going to start setting up in November, which is great. Hold off for Nowruz. I really encourage you to hold off for Nowruz because Nowruz is celebrated for the 2 weeks, for the 12 days after the ringing of the new year. So we actually extended on the other end rather than before. So I really, really encourage you to just hold off because you want that sabzeh also in a perfect world. You want that sabzeh to last for those 12 days. Because then we have the final Nowruz event, which is Sizdah Bedar, the 13th day of these celebrations, where we then say goodbye to our sabzeh and we all head outdoors to the fields and the valleys and picnic and literally touch grass and tie grass blades together and say goodbye to our sabzeh.
That's right. And another beauty of the sofre is that it incorporates a lot of elements of nature and things that you have around. So that's one thing I always tell people, like one of the elements is the fruit of the oleaster tree, which is very nice. You can get it from your local Persian market, but if you don't have that connection to the fruit of the oleaster tree, or you can also, have seeb, which is an apple, which we all have a lot of connections with, or all these other seed, which is garlic. So very simple ingredients, and a really nice thing to do with kids too, because it's really, again, very simple to put together. You can make it as elaborate or as simple as you want, but I always encourage simplicity with these things for sure.
I do too. I think these traditions, although if you go to a big gathering or a big, they have these festivals, it's beautiful to see the sofre hafsin, which is like, it's like 6 feet long and gorgeous, beautiful. But I think bringing it back into our homes, it needs to hold meaning for you and your family, whatever that means. If you like it blingy and shiny, and go for it. If you like it simple and, like you said, just from nature, or, we live in difficult economic times. And this is a really perfect example. You don't need to go and buy a bunch of new little plates to hold. I use my nalbeki, and I have for years. My little Persian teacups, they have like the little saucers, which we call nalbeki. I use those. That's what I've used, and that's what I'm going to continue to use. One thing, like you'll notice on my sofra half scene, you're supposed to put a mirror, a beautiful mirror, right? It's the mirror of fortune. It reflects light. And so it reflects light back into your life and for the new year to come. So when I moved out on my own and I moved to Los Angeles on my own, I was I was pursuing acting, and I was a struggling actor. Um, and I didn't have a beautiful mirror. So I bought these three little tiny mirrors because they were on sale in some, I don't know, Home Goods or something like that. And I still use those because, because although it's not symbolic to put three mirrors, you're supposed to have one mirror. But to me, that holds meaning of a time for me, and I like them.
Yeah, that's so nice. And what about your family? Does your husband like notice? Does he get really into it? He's American, right?
My husband gets into it. He gets into
Yeah,
it
I
more
do.
than I get into it.
Yeah.
He's checking on that sabzeh every morning, spraying it. He's become an expert, frankly, with sabzeh
Amazing.
growing. Yes, my family gets into it. In fact, 2 years ago, I wasn't here on Nowruz, and they set it up all by themselves, and we FaceTimed, and it looked beautiful. They had it all set up. My kids are into it. My kids' friends know about it and are into it. I have friends who are not Iranian, who are, American. whatever that means. Um, uh, and they are teachers, and they have brought this tradition into their classrooms now. They're elementary school teachers, and with my help and with other resources, they're now growing sabzé with their students. It's really lovely. I think it's really beautiful. So go forth, be calm with Nowruz. It doesn't have to be perfect. But it should be joyous.
Yes. Yes. And it's about community. That's the most important part too. Seeing your friends, seeing your family, and just eating together and doing all those things that brings us joy in life. And of course, touching grass.
Yes. So lean into the light, lean into joy. If you do bake, share with your neighbors, your next door neighbor, whomever they may be. Knock on their door. We've lost these traditions.
Right. One thing I've started doing is I make jars of torshi as my gift for Nowruz. So that's always been so I'm going to start that pretty soon as well, starting the little jars. And now that you mention it, I think that's a great idea to give it to my neighbors as well. I'm going to do that.
Yeah. So I wish everyone a very, very happy Nowruz. Eid Hamegi Mubarak.
Thank you so much. So whenever you're listening to this, March 7th is when we begin. Again, it's at Bottom of the Pot. We'll be linking to it. We'll be doing daily updates on our sabzé as well. Me and my kids will be doing it together. And so Naz June, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Layla. June, this guy wants to say hi. Okay, come on. Yeah. He wants my seat.
Yes, got it. Okay, it's all yours, Pishi June. Maybe we'll do an interview with you next.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. And until next time.